Hey, what's up guys? I received a lot of positive feedback on my previous video, specifically regarding the section where I spoke about DPS uptime. A lot of you found it useful to be it Dragoon mains or other melee players. This gave me the idea to put together a more in-depth guide on arguably one of the most important aspects of dealing damage, uptime. Throughout my entire time playing Final Fantasy XIV, I've always been a melee main, from Monk during Gordius, to Dragoon and Midas, and Ninja Fruit Creator. I've amassed a variety of material that showcases examples for each job. Before we get started, I'd like to share some words of wisdom from a good friend of mine, Bok Choy McNuggets. Let us start with the basics. Uptime has a fairly straightforward meaning. It is the duration you spend dealing damage to your target. Ideally, you want to spend as much time as possible pressing buttons and hitting the boss. Sounds like a simple concept, right? But maintaining uptime can get tricky when you factor in positionals, managing your off-GCDs, general fight mechanics, movement, group coordination, invuln periods, phase transitions, and or intermissions. Don't worry, I'll be breaking things down with plenty of examples and scenarios to help you maximize your DPS potential. Before we dive into the good stuff, I want to touch on one of the most important basic skills and what I believe separates top players from the average player. Always be pressing something. Always keep your GCD rolling, constantly be pressing the buttons. If for whatever reason your GCD isn't spinning, you are doing it wrong. When analyzing FF logs of average players, you'll find that most of them have one thing in common: low CPM. CPM stands for casts per minute. Regardless if you are melee or not, you should be maximizing your CPM. This goes back to what I said before. Always be pressing something. How can CPM be low? Perhaps you're just trying to hit a positional. Maybe you're not paying attention to your GCD, or maybe you're just not using your off GCDs efficiently. But pressing the wrong button is better than not pressing anything at all. Now, I'm not trying to say that mashing your keyboard will enable you to hit 95th percentile or above. However, pressing buttons keeps your brain active as well as it making it easier to recover from mistakes. I can't tell you how many times I've made a mistake just to subconsciously recover flawlessly due to always being active in pressing my abilities. Always be pressing something. I can't stress this enough. This is without a doubt the biggest factor separating the top players from the bottom. Assuming you've spent countless hours on a strike dummy practicing your opener, ignoring all your IRL obligations and basic human necessities, let's jump into raid and talk about boss mechanics. First, we'll talk about mechanics that can be identified rather quickly: cast bars. For cast bar mechanics, your position is recorded as the cast is finishing. These mechanics are generally simpler to handle as you'll always have an indicator to dance around, position yourself accordingly, and then return back to your main objective, attacking the enemy. Abilities such as O3S's Spellblade Fire 3, Folio, the game, O4S's Thunder 3, A11S's Propeller Wind, and Tail End and Zervaniax are all examples of this type of ability. As long as you are in a position where your character is registered as safe, whether it be your square position for Folio in the game, outside the range for Fire 3, or behind the tower for Propeller Wind, you can move freely immediately after the cast finishes with no repercussions. Next we'll talk about mechanics that require a bit more focus: visual animations. These mechanics check your position as the animation happens. Grand Cross Alpha and O4S, Sacrament in A12S, and Steamroller in A10S are all abilities that have specific animations which can be used to your advantage in maximizing DPS. In A12S, you can stay in the hitbox for Sacrament when Alexander has finished his cast, as long as you are safely out of range when the animation goes off. For Grand Cross Alpha, or any Grand Cross that applies a Hysteria debuff to your character, you don't have to move into the center of the arena until the damage registers. Jumping also negates the movement for Hysteria, so use this to your advantage. Let's move on to some of my favorite fight mechanics, the ones that truly allow a player to shine when executed correctly. These are certain abilities that can kill you easily if mishandled, but are worth the risk once you figure out precise timing and techniques. These are abilities that have no true indicator of when they are going to happen. You have to solely rely on your knowledge and patterns of the fight. A11S's Optical Sight, Zervan Meteors, A8S Flamethrower with Prey, and charges in A10S are all examples of this. Once you learn the specific ins and outs of these mechanics, you can easily bob and weave to keep that damage up. Risks. Before continuing further, I would like to stress the importance of taking risks to push DPS, but not to the point of wiping your party. I would only test things during progression or optimization runs. Maximizing uptime requires a strong reaction time. If you have difficulty adjusting to certain things on the fly or struggle breaking safe play habits, then executing some of these tactics may leave you with a feeling of malaise. That is perfectly okay, and as long as you practice and are willing to try new strats, you'll be able to comfortably assess whether or not certain things are possible. Do not feel deterred if you mistime something or make even the simplest of mistakes when trying to push yourself further. Practice makes perfect. Section 4. Auto Attacks. Remember when I talked about keeping your GCDs rolling? You can't forget about the small but crucial damage your auto attacks give you. The difference between getting 3 extra auto attacks could be the difference between you beating someone or not. Now you may be asking me, Momo, where would I lose auto attacks? That's a good question, my fellow viewer. Due to recent changes in 3.4, auto attacks now land in any direction even if you are facing backwards. This makes it seemingly difficult to actually lose an auto attack in a fight. However, there are still scenarios where you can miss them. The most common ways to lose autos can range from fight downtime, switching targets, and of being forced to position yourself at max melee range. Take a fight like Neo X. When Neo uses Grand Cross Alpha or Light and Darkness, he disappears and reappears in a different position of the arena. When this happens, your target resets and you have to manually retarget him to start using your auto attacks again. However, if you do not right click him and you use tab or left click, your auto attacks do not start until a GCD action lands damage onto him. Other fights have similar types of downtime mechanics like this. X-Death has Decisive Battle, A10S has Steamroller, A11S has Active Time Maneuver, A12S has Inception and Chronofoil, and AAS has Intermission Phases. Now let's talk about switching targets. Switching targets is useful when you want to multi-dot or AoE other targets without losing uptime. The same ideology as with downtime mechanics is applied here. However, if your autos are already spinning on the boss and you tab over to an ad, your autos will still be spinning. If for some reason you are not targeting the boss and an ad spawns, your auto attacks will not continue to spin when you tap target onto said ad, and you will have to right click or press a GCD onto it to start them up. If there are multiple targets that spawn, I would personally right click the one you want to target, as you risk losing DPS due to improper tab targeting. Max melee range. Max melee can let you be able to stay on the boss to get extra GCDs, but can be detrimental to your auto attacks as well, making it a double-edged sword. The distance for max melee range is 3 yalms from the boss. Anything farther than this, and you cannot hit your GCDs. The maximum range for auto attacks is the same. So here's where it gets interesting. If you need to be at max melee range for a mechanic, optimally you want to make sure you see an auto attack hit before moving to that distance, otherwise you risk losing DPS. Examples of these types of mechanics include Zoom Doom in A7S, Temporal Stasis in A12S, and potential spots in O2S and O3S. Section 5. Movement. Has your tank ever had to move the boss while you're mid-GCD in the cancels? Yeah, it feels bad, man. Almost every melee DPS has ran into this problem before. Luckily, you can negate this by preemptively running ahead of the boss, normally parallel, before your tank moves. If you move in a parallel direction to the boss, but stand 1 to 2 yalms ahead of it, not max melee, you should be able to continue hitting your GCDs as the boss moves to their designated location. Another and more common way you can increase uptime with movement is by memorizing boss patterns and using them to your advantage. For example, in O3S, the boss will always jump to the center of the arena and face north when casting the Queen's Waltz during the second phase of the fight. For Neo X-Death, he will spawn randomly around the arena after Grand Cross Alpha, In A10s, the boss would jump to the ice trap immediately following the first charge. And in A5s, the boss would dash to its prey target. When mechanics like these appear in raids, I look at them and think to myself, how can I manipulate this mechanic so I don't lose uptime? Every encounter has little opportunities like this for optimization. Section 6. Off-GCD AOE Usage. While not particularly the same as what I've shared thus far, I'd still consider this a category of uptime as you're trying to maximize targets hit by said skills. When using a skill to hit multiple targets, a lot of players like to throw the word padding around. There is a difference between padding and efficient use of your damage. If using an off-GCD skill frees up the use of a GCD from another player, letting them use it on the boss is more boss damage than having them waste GCDs on said target. Think of it as effective damage, as it's the equivalent of dealing double or triple the damage. If holding an off-GCD skill allows you to hit 2 or 3 targets in less than the cooldown of the skills in the said window, then delaying it for the moment will always almost be worth it unless you need to use those skills for a particular reason, such as burst phases. In O4S, you have to kill the meteors. They are targets that are part of a DPS check that must be completed. Using the Strahn, Elixir Field, Howling Fist, Katon, or any other off-GCD AoE ability to free up weapon skills or spells on those targets will be more overall raid damage than not using them. This is effective damage. In O3S, the White Flame, Dragon, and a Panda ad all have to die for you to progress through the fight. Optimizing your AoE around these targets to efficiently free up GCD slots is good play. Later on in this fight, several ads spawn, and although it is more efficient raid DPS wise to range LB, saving AoE off GCDs and using other AoE weapon skills and spells to kill these ads will inflate your DPS, thus considered padding. Section 7. Uptime and Positioning. Fights have mechanics where you can keep uptime by abusing the normal way of handling them if you can adapt quickly. This comes with understanding the way said mechanic works and how to position yourself to work around it. Take Susano EX. If you are marked with the knockback, you can move yourself to be knocked back to the front of the boss rather than behind. This shortens the gap between you and the boss, allowing yourself to get back to him quicker. It does not cost Susano to turn, so your party members can continue to hit their positionals. Similar techniques can be used in fights like A7S during the hammers. While the party moves left, you can move right if you aren't targeted by a hammer and continue hitting your GCDs. Positioning yourself at max melee range in A6S and A8S will enable you to keep hitting your GCDs while avoiding getting hit by the double drill. Getting an extra positional in A1S during Resin Bomb due to the fact that the mechanic was on a server timer. Positioning yourself on the edge of the arena in Sephiroth to avoid downtime during End Soft. And in Nidhogg, during the final phase, you could place your eye AoE on the rear and then move to the center of the hitbox and continue hitting your positionals rather than coming off completely to run to the far corner and stack. Section 8. Group Coordination. Raiding is a team effort. Idealistically, all 8 players should strive to perform to the best of their abilities and help each member maximize their potential through coordination. If your team isn't willing to cooperate and play as a team, some things may be harder to pull off. I want to showcase some clips of good team coordination and tactics. Placing the melee on the 2 tiles east of the boss in O3S so they can hit the opponent head right away while also being able to continue hitting the boss. In O4S, you can maintain the tank's uptime on the boss by rearranging the positions for Grand Cross Delta. Mitigating G8 100 so the tank that gets targeted doesn't have to lose GCDs getting off the boss. Rearranging the second temporal stasis in A12S so melee can get complete uptime. Positioning the A10S boss in between the north trap and the center trap. You can also coordinate with a party member to handle specific mechanics to your advantage. For example, in AAS, you can have your healer pop your Discord orb before you get there to stack, thus minimizing GCD loss. During the ad phase in A3S, monks could keep their Grease Lightning stacks if the party members didn't attack their ad. In A1S, you could stack your resins on one flank and keep your ads there to use AoE off GCDs before having to pull them to their lasers. Section 9. Gap Closers. Dragoon, Monk, and Ninja all have costless gap closers. Samurai also has a gap closer, but it requires 10 Kenki. Dragoon has Elusive Jump, Spine Shatter Dive, and Dragonfire Dive. Monk has Shoulder Tackle, Ninja has Shikuchi, and Samurai has Gyuten. Knowing when to hold these situational skills to get an extra GCD in an encounter will be essential in taking your DPS to the next level. This is easier for Dragoons and Ninjas as Elusive Jump and Shikuchi do not interrupt their rotations, while Monks and Samurais do. Shoulder Tackle is a 130 potency move that is part of a Monk's off GCD rotation. Due to the insanely short cooldown, it is very easy to lose a usage of this skill over the course of a fight by holding it. However, losing a usage of Shoulder Tackle to gain an extra GCD and potential auto attack is better than getting an extra usage of the skill. I can't tell you when exactly to use or hold your gap closers as they are situational, but I've provided some clips that give examples of optimal usage. Section 10. Buff Uptime Optimization. I want to talk about cooldown alignment and planning. This next part is going to be from a Dragoon perspective, however, will be relevant for every job. For this example, I will be using O1S as it is the most common turn at the moment. Let's give the fight a kill time of 5 minutes and 30 seconds. With this information in mind, we know that we'll only get a maximum of 6 trick attacks, 4 blood for bloods, 2 battle litanies and 2 battle voices, 3 dragon sights, chain stratagems, emboldens, hypercharges, as well as 2 potions. Now that we know how many potential skill uses we can get in, we can start mapping them out. Assuming we get each buff off in the opener, that leaves us with 1 less of each. Since we're only getting 1 more use of battle litany and battle voice after the opener, we will want to save it for the second potion burst. Now all we have to worry about is our 2-minute cooldowns. The fight may end at 6 minutes, but our big burst comes around 4:40. That leaves us with 30 seconds of wiggle room for the usage of our 2-minute cooldowns. Due to this lenient timer, the most ideal spot for those 2-minute cooldowns would be saving them for the third trick attack, which is at 2:12. This gives you kind of a mini burst as each job has a tiny burst at this point in the fight. In order to get our Nestron under our reopener at 4:40, we want to make sure to use Garskogel before we use the Mirage Dive that gives us our 4th eye. If you don't do this, you will have to go into your Life of the Dragon window or hold Garskogel, losing usage over the encounter. I hope this explained my thought process behind cooldown management. I basically just look at where we want bursts during specific parts of the fight and adjust accordingly. While super uncommon, under certain circumstances you could use a cooldown such as Blood for Blood, Internal Release, or any other damage dealing cooldown during downtime or pre-pull to get an extra use of said cooldown in the encounter. For this to be a DPS increase, extreme conditions must be met. These conditions are getting an extra use over the encounter, not losing any important buff synergy, and getting all your important off-GCDs/GCDs into the shorter duration window. If these conditions are met, then using a buff early to get a longer duration of the total use of the said buff over the fight will be overall gain. And now as we wrap things up, I really want to thank all the players and viewers for their endless support, feedback, and energy. I really enjoyed putting together guides like this, and I hope this info will help push your DPS to the next level.